Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm excited to have Derek Adams and Gus Perez here with me from EarthBridge Energy. EarthBridge is an energy tech startup developing a long-duration energy storage technology. It combines the best aspects of oil and gas, geothermal and energy storage. And this is a 24/7 renewable energy technology that really enables us to transition to a net zero tomorrow. I'm excited. Okay, tell us about the secret sauce. No, just kidding. No, tell us how it works.
Sure. Well, hey, thanks for signing that NDA before we got in here. And of course, all your listeners, right, will have signed a virtual. No, thanks for having us on the show, first of all. Big fan of the show, actually. It's really good. Really great work you're doing here. Yeah. So thanks for that. So the secret sauce really comes down to how do we store energy for a very long period of time, right? So up until recently, the penetration of intermittent renewables like wind and solar in the grid have not gotten to a point where you need longer and longer duration storage. And that's where we call it the GeoBattery. That's where the GeoBattery comes in. And so we're able to store energy for not just hours, but days to weeks to months at a time.
And weeks and months. Okay, and that's what we mean by long duration storage. So exactly. The contrast here is lithium ion batteries, like the one I have at my house, good for maybe 4 to 6 hours a day if you stretch it. But really, we're talking about shifting things up to a week or months, right?
Exactly. Yeah, up to seasonal in length in terms of energy storage.
Yeah, and perhaps you want to mention about the current curtailment of energy.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is, for me actually, I guess we'll probably get there, but the light bulb moment for me was when I realized that we were just wasting so much renewable energy. I mean, literally just complete, flushing it down the toilet. It's like, wait a minute, we got all this clean energy. How can we be wasting it? And it comes down to a mismatch of when that energy is available and when there's demand for electricity. And so California is kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to sort of wasted energy or curtailment, right? Where look, they don't need the energy, and they tell the wind and solar producers that are generating power, don't send your power to the grid. Shut down.
Shut it off. Feather the turbines. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so that curtailment adds up. So California curtailed like 2.5 million megawatt hours last year alone, which is like enough power for over 300,000 homes for the year. So we need a way to be able to store this energy, this waste energy, right? For when it's needed. And that's exactly what we do.
Yeah. And I know there are a couple of companies that have also identified the challenge, and they're using different approaches. Some of them are using chemical storage. Tell me a little bit more about, you said the GeoBattery, what makes it unique?
Yeah, so the way that it works is essentially we use that waste electricity to withdraw water from an underground layer, right? A reservoir, I'm sure most of your audience is familiar with what a reservoir is, but it's a reservoir, or think a sandstone, right? Or a layer of sand that contains non-potable water. And we bring that to the surface, heat it up. We actually generate some cold at the same time. And then we put the hot and the cold water back down into that same layer, but in a different area, a different zone. And the earth is a really good insulator. It's a really good thermos, right? It can hold that heat and that cold in for a long time. We're talking months at a time here with minimal temperature loss. And so then when either that wind and solar, that excess energy is unavailable or there's demand, we bring that back to the surface to then generate geothermal electricity.
Yeah, and just to add more color to that, you mentioned what's the difference between the competitors or the other players, not competitors, because really we can count with the hand the number of players. It's the duration. That's the reservoirs are massive storage vessels, massive storage vessels for energy storage, and that's what we're going after, the duration, long duration.
And you said that I guess the insulation or the storage thermos, as it is so good that you can store it for months and it will retain that heat or that cold for that kind of duration.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the properties of rocks are well known. They're going to vary from place to place a little bit, but in general, I mean, we are able to model exactly how long that heat is going to last and
stay there.
And how much, therefore, how long can you count on that battery to deliver energy?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking, I've been to the caves up in Austin. It is nice and chilly in there.
That's right.
It is. Yeah. The fact that we're going down a certain, to a certain depth, that temperature then stays constant all year. So sometimes for some power generation, the actual air temperature, because depending on how how they're generating power, that air temperature fluctuates throughout the year and can actually affect sort of how efficient that power generation is. So another benefit is that we stay constant, all year round, all season round.
And basically, you have this heat, hot and cold, and this is a traditional like source for a heat engine. So you have a conversion system. And one of the nuances I'm hearing here is you chill one of the reservoirs, and I assume that gives you a little more efficiency in the system.
That's right. So the way that the water is or the way that the electricity is converted into heat energy that we put into the water is through a heat pump, right? And so a heat pump, you're always taking heat energy from one place and putting it into another place. And so the way that you could reject that heat to the atmosphere, basically frankly, that cold energy. Heat energy is heat, right? But it can be cold. So you can reject it to the atmosphere, or you can save it. Yeah. And that's really what gets the efficiency way up, is being able to save that energy, that cold energy. That's
an interesting nuance. I've definitely seen other folks try to eke out more efficiency, and one of the strategies was to make steam, for example, because then you get that benefit of boiling water and the latent heat of latent transition heat as a way to store and recover it. But this is just another technique where you're trying to manage the thermal dynamics. So
exactly.
That's very brilliant. It's a brilliant nuance. So.
Yeah, it's an efficiency challenge, if you will, and that's the way we figure out it's the way to address it.
Yeah. And so when you think about the time for the business, we heard kind of like the market is there, right? There's this renewables challenge that is increasing as we get more renewables on the market every year. Is there a technology change or something, there's a new know-how that allows us to do this today, where you've discovered this is the solution?
So without getting too much into the weeds, the heat pump technology has improved over the last 5 years to give you the temperature lifts you need, right? That delta T from your starting temperature to your ending temperature, and just the sheer scale. So the industrial scale of these things, to be able to dump 50 megawatts of thermal energy into the water to heat it up. That's one for sure. And we're partnered with a couple of turbo machinery companies to ensure that supply chain, is smooth once we roll this thing out in terms of, deployment, widespread deployment. But I'm trying to think, Gus, is there any, other, it's the why now, really comes down to, again, just penetration of renewables. Right? Yeah. We can't get to net zero on wind and solar alone because we can't run a stable grid. And so the long duration, and that's the thing. So keep in mind, the Department of Energy defines long duration as 10 hours, if you're over 10 hours. And that, sure, we could do that. But then, we go into the thousands, frankly, of hours, and anywhere in between. So the system's very flexible. That's another kind of challenge, certainly for like chemical-based batteries, where if you want longer duration, you need to build twice as many batteries. If you want twice the duration, you need twice as many batteries. And so that CapEx keeps going up and up and up as the duration increases. So one GeoBattery enables, that CapEx you spend on a GeoBattery enables storage durations from, hours to days to weeks, and anywhere in between. And, the seasonal demands fluctuate throughout the year, right? Because of various reasons, heat in the winter, you need more cooling in the summer, and depending on where what latitude you're at, et cetera. And so being able to adjust that, that system is able to adjust to meet that need. If you need to go from 5 days because you're paired with a wind farm, or you need to, back it off because it's a really, windy time of the year and you only need a few hours at a time. So that's the other, I think, huge benefit is the flexibility.
Yeah. And you can decouple kind of the power from the actual storage amount. But in many ways, your reservoir is so large that they're very independent, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the size of Houston. Right? Yeah. Houston's a big city, right? Think about a storage tank that is 100 feet high and covers the entire span of Houston.
Yeah.
Huge. And I think it's maybe a good time to add that we have 3 national labs supporting and validating the process, the technologies, and really interested and involved in the process of making this happen. So
yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the technical risk. Where do you see the risks remain in terms of bringing this to market?
Yeah, so some of the turbo machinery, I'll just say this out loud, is TRL6, right? So that's going to need to, they're kind of bespoke at this point. They are off the shelf, but I like to say that the shelf doesn't have a lot of units on it, right? So that's going to need to have some work to get those costs down, right? But that's more of a manufacturing challenge. All the same risks, or many of the same risks that apply to drilling a well for oil and gas, except lower risk in our case because our wells are significantly shallower in depth. So and what we were talking before the show about shale wells, and we love oil and gas wells because they give us a ton of data, right? So in Texas, it's a pincushion of wells, and you get all kinds of great subsurface data from these wells. But they're going 8,000, 9,000, 15,000 feet, whereas we're going maybe 2,000 feet. We want to get down to that first rock layer below drinking water aquifers that we can do this in. And that varies from place to place. And in a sedimentary basin, you have tons of options. But even outside of sedimentary basins, you've got anywhere you can drill a well for water, you can drill for a GeoBattery. Yeah. And so the costs there are, cost savings are huge.
So tell me about how you think about some of the business risks, because I think one of the challenges we are seeing is how does storage get paid? And I think there's an arbitrage opportunity when you think about short-term storage. I'm sure there's an arbitrage opportunity with long-term storage, but there's not necessarily a mechanism in place to encourage this kind of storage today. How do you think about it?
So the easiest way to think about it, it's the same way a peaker plant. It's uses the commercialization of a peaker plant, which is pretty much when the prices are high, you turn it on, and then which is arbitrage that you talk about, arbitrage that you talk about. Now I will say that for new technologies is a bit more difficult than for established gas peaker plants, and something we find very interesting is that that's exactly what a GeoBattery can do, can replace fossil fuel emission peaker plants, and it can be commercialized exactly in the same way. So that's kind of like furthermore what might make it another commercial risk is the financing of these assets, right? Because these are capex intensive initially, but you can recover that significantly quicker depending on what area you're doing the arbitrage. So
and one of the things we know about Houston is we know how to finance peaker plants. So exactly. There's an understanding of kind of the irregularity there.
So for Houston, it's a lot easier managing the financing of these assets. So that's why we're going first. Yeah, Texas first.
And I know that the show hasn't aired, but one of the companies we brought on for an earlier episode is looking at how to provide incentives for the carbon offset that you guys are going to essentially generate. And so there's only upside in some sense if there's a way to kind of capture that value of shifting the grid from a higher carbon intensity one to a lower intensity one.
And if I can add, there's also federal incentives, significant federal incentives in terms of what investment tax credits it can apply to this type of technology, which is up to 40%. Significant.
Pretty significant.
Very significant.
Yeah, that was in the IRA for storage now, and it used to be for only renewables plus, so wind and solar plus storage.
And now in one project,
right?
Yeah. Now it's
storage is decoupled. Exactly, and that's a huge deal. The other thing, I guess, on that front would be the regulatory side. So grid interconnection can take a very long time. Storage, though, is being prioritized in many markets. Certainly here, but pretty much all over the country.
But by the market or by regulatory incentives?
Regulatory.
Okay,
which is really where the challenge exists there. Okay. It can be very burdensome. It can be 5 years, right, to wait to connect to the grid.
It's very interesting to analyze the queue line of producers or solar farms, wind farms waiting in the line for years but because there's so many in the list, and there's only so many the grid can take. So
And one of the things I liked is about this technology and where you live is you can put it anywhere. You can drill a water well. I think is one of the things I saw, and this must make the kind of the project finance aspect simpler in some ways because you can overlay your ArcGIS data of where the known drilling is and where the grid interconnects are, and that's got to be a good alternative to some other technologies.
Yeah, exactly. And you can put it where the demand is, right?
Yeah.
So you avoid transmission congestion, transmission build out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You can place it in where the demand is or where the excess is. It depends on, you can build a strategy based on that, depending on the case. Right?
Yeah, and it's got a small footprint, right? All the action's taking place underground. And so, you can build a facility's 5 acres maybe at most.
I don't know what that is.
So
how many football fields is that? No, 5 acres. No, this is like the size of the Ion District downtown. That's
I mean, so
it.
that can be, of course, if you're in like the heart of a city, 5 acre, you're not going to get 5 acres, right? But compared to other wind, solar, that are just huge, right?
Those wind farms, you just drive and drive.
Oh man, I was driving to Death Valley a few weeks ago. We're coming like down the mountains, and there's this massive just solar field along the highway, and I was amazed. It's the right place to put it, but it's just huge, and we were still far away from it on the highway. But that's how far away you have to put some of these assets because of how big they are.
Right. Yeah, how big they are, and where the resource is.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Where the wind or where the sun is. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So dig a little more into how you guys decided now is the time to start this business. I think we heard the story about kind of the market dynamics, but there's always that time where you raise your hand and say, I'm going to be the founder. And so I'd love to hear, Derek, like how you came about that realization.
Yeah. I mean, probably for some folks, or a lot of folks tell the story of there's that one time, right? For me, it was a series of, I think, small events. I think it wasn't. I woke up one day and said, I'm gonna start a company. It was just a lot of little things, I think, that added up. I mentioned earlier all of the waste. For me, that was what just kind of ate at me in the back of my head all the time. It was like, holy cow! It still blows my mind how much we're wasting in terms of clean energy. And so, putting a reservoir together just because that's what that's where my head was at for 10 years. Putting that together with storage, I said, hey, this is something actually. So full disclosure, I keep a Gmail draft called Crazy Ideas, and I just wake up in the middle of the night, I've got a crazy idea, and instead of a pad and paper, I put it in a Gmail draft. Hopefully I don't delete that. Anyway, so that's where the list is. And I'd bounce them off people sometimes, or talk to my wife about it and say, hey, what do you think of this, that, the other thing? This was one of the crazy ideas that I think got the most traction with other folks. Right? It was like, hey, this. Yeah. Why is no one doing that? That's
as you said, it's also a combination of things for me. We have the Geothermal Renaissance, if you will, that kind of brought us together at the same time. The similarities with the oil and gas business and the potential that has in Houston. It's just a big vessel. And we met through the GET organization, right?
Global Energy Transition.
And that's how we also kind of started through that organization.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the Geothermal Renaissance and what brought you guys together. Yeah.
So that was one of the small things. So Jamie Beard, who was out at UT for a long time, she puts on a conference called Pivot. It's an all free virtual conference that they were running since 2020, I believe, was the first year. Maybe 2019.
It was like mid-COVID, I remember when that.
Yeah, it was like 19 or 20 when they started, and I remember listening in on that and saying, "Whoa, this is intellectually interesting too, right? From a scientific point of view. Obviously, what I was doing from a geoscience standpoint has tons of overlap with geothermal. And then, it's a renewable, and it has, it's a tough energy challenge, right? And that attracted me for sure. And then seeing the startups pitch, and work there, it's like, hey, maybe we should throw our hat in the ring. So Global Energy Transition that we mentioned, it's a nonprofit. It's a fairly new nonprofit, and that is trying to transition oil and gas folks and companies into the energy transition. So they help facilitate that, and they've got executives from all kinds of companies and stuff. It's grown a ton in the last 2 years. So that's kind of where we met, and I don't know, kindred spirit, and was like, hey, yeah, let's do this. And from a skills standpoint, we complemented each other very well. Gus on the finance side, and me on the tech side and the business side, and also Gus on the business side.
On the commercial side.
Commercial side, yeah. You wear a lot of hats in a startup. So
yeah. One of the biggest challenges for us was moving into the power markets and understanding the power markets. This is not an easy task, and it's key to before you start building a business, understanding where are the needs, where are the challenges, and because at the end of the day, it's a pricing game, and it's a very strong game in terms of when you go out and negotiate PPAs or negotiate power contracts. So it needs to be very well understood before.
Yeah, in many ways, it's similar to like hydrocarbons in the sense that you're kind of shipping units of energy around, but the oil and gas industry has a lot of relatively lots of storage, whereas the electrical industry and energy industry is like power market, zero storage until recently.
Or very limited. There's some, but it's very small. And when you compare the amount of gigawatts produced versus what's stored, it's
much more real time in some ways.
Right.
And then the other piece is it's highly regulated in a way that's very different from traditional oil and gas, where oil and gas is a lot of independent oil companies. And so just the way people make decisions is just fundamentally different.
Exactly. Right? And there's a significant amount of different generation types that compete against each other. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and it varies, right, depending on where you are, right? What market
state,
are you in?
What market? Yeah.
States, markets, of course, different countries. Yeah, I have all their different layers.
So what was most surprising that you discovered as like a contrast as you learn more about this market?
I think it's the regulated versus deregulated markets within, and how the importance of ISOs or like ERCOT and those in CAISO and the different rules that each one has. It's a very interesting playground, can we say? But it's a ground. It's really interesting. So.
Yeah, and it's really great because you can sort of the states as natural laboratories thing applies, or in this case markets, right? So you can there are interesting aspects of all of them, and it's interesting to see how one system or what their priorities have produced, and then what are their challenges and how can we solve them. So solving storage in Texas in ERCOT looks a lot different than solving storage in CAISO, in California ISO. Here, not just because of the regulatory, but also the resources. So they're they've got the duck curve out in California because typically their wind and solar are fairly tied together in terms of when wind and solar are producing. Here in Texas, it's actually kind of the opposite. We have a lot of obviously sun during the day, but the wind tends to pick up at night. And then you've got other places of the country where wind can vary depending on the season quite a bit. And so understanding how best to fit into each of those markets and each of those sort of customer types, how the application has been really, really interesting.
Do you have a sense of how the two markets view technology differently? And I know you're sitting in a different seat now, because before you were more on the technology acquisition side, and now you're selling it. So I don't know if you feel like there are differences in the way new technology is understood.
California's got the tech history, sure. Houston, and I think we're going to talk about Houston, but Houston's certainly, getting there, but has traditional views that may be a little different. California, they're starting to, I think, kind of, I don't want to say wake up, but they overbuilt their wind and solar, right? And they're struggling with how do you fill in that base load. And they're trying to, in some sense, have their cake and eat it too, right? They want to be clean and they want to be, emission-free, but there aren't too many technologies that give you baseload, 24/7 emission-free energy. And so how do you fill that gap? The ecosystems have been a little different, but I don't know. And now I'm going to contradict what I just said, because also in Texas, there's a ton of startups and a ton of innovation too. I'm just kind of thinking as I'm talking here, and there are some differences, but I think that, both places, certainly from a growth in innovation standpoint, Texas has really got, and Houston in particular, is just off the charts.
And talk to me a little bit about fundraising, right? I know you have a grant, I believe.
So we've got a combination of dilutive, non-dilutive.
Okay.
We've been pretty good on the non-dilutive on the grant side. And I think we were talking before the show. We're in a round now for our next raise. And if any of your listeners are investors, feel free to reach out. Can't talk about details just because we're actively negotiating, but so that's been fun. That's as also we were talking about before the show. At least on the VC side, it's a challenge in this market right now.
Without revealing too many details, did you talk to angels, or are you talking primarily to VCs? I assume you're putting together a seed round. If that's the way you're positioning it.
Yeah, sort of seed Series A. I mean, because again, before the show, we were talking a little bit about CapEx, for these projects, right? We're not writing an app, and we're not, our laboratory is very large and costs a lot of money, right? We're not building a new battery chemistry that you can, do at the small scale. And so these are big projects, frankly, right? And so that's the scale that we're going for is inherently larger.
It inherently requires venture capital.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
And corporate venture capital as well.
And the corps.
Yeah. And do you feel like there was a willingness to I guess I'm curious if there was feedback you got from fundraising for the first time as first time founders. Tell me about how that experience was going straight to VC.
Can I start?
Go ahead, guys. Yeah,
There's I will say there's two areas where we focus. It's either the renewable VCs, like very strong on renewables and green energy, and then there's the oil and gas focused, and there's a very different people to talk to and negotiate with. So and each one of them have a interest for the technology, but they also have they don't want to mix together, if you will. So that's a challenge. So and then the other challenge is the new technology thing, and we're been the first time doing this, and then there's a level of risk that needs to be understood.
And did you find I guess where did you find investors? Did you start with like a CVC list? Did you go to the West Coast, or
trying all of the above?
Accelerators
is a good one. That's a good start. And then you have to add to the list. There's two ways. You look online and trying to reach to them directly. There are some that are open to that, very open to that, and there's also the more important, which is the warm introduction. As you start talking to people and start making noise, people talk to another one, and that I will say that's probably the best one, right? When we get introduced, and hey, talk to these guys. I know these guys, and that's actually probably the best.
That's been the most effective way, right? I mean, a handshake and a look somebody in the eye, right? But it was tough because it was, kind of we launched this, depending on when COVID era, you define COVID era, but I mean, in 21, and that was still an issue for the country, and so that was I think a benefit though, because folks were used to doing a lot, Zoom calls all the time and comfortable with that. And so once those connections were made, the follow-on conversations, so we didn't have to fly out to the West Coast. We didn't have to go to New York. It was Zoom, frankly, that we did all the negotiating over. So that was good. We're blessed a little bit here in Houston, right? By talking to, this is becoming quite the nexus of innovation. And so, talking about some of the corps and things like that, going to RICE events and things like that are, we're very lucky, I think, to have the Houston ecosystem and be able to do stuff in person.
The ecosystem's matured in some ways. They are matured is one way to describe it. we've also had a lot of programs that have been here a long time, like the Rice Energy Tech Forum is coming up in September. It's always a fantastic place to see new startups and a lot of good investors in the room, but also corporate leaning, right? Folks coming from industry, and in some ways they're able to synchronize kind of on the themes they're working on. But it's definitely a good place to connect with folks. So I'm excited about that one coming up.
No, we'll be there.
Do you think the way they looked at the technology risk, did you find there were any reservations or any challenges while you were talking to VCs? And kind of to quote a discussion earlier, like you're not building an app, and sometimes folks are used to looking at that. So how did people perceive the technology?
So that's what I was trying to mention, the two different groups. When you talk to green kind of VCs, they're concerned about the drilling, and so that's an area. And on the other side, when you talk to the oil and gas, they're concerned about the electricity production and the commercialization of that, and how's that going to work. So it depends on who you're talking to. You have to address. Some folks are concerned about some topics, the other ones are concerned about the other topic. A lot easier to talk to oil and gas venture capital when you're talking about drilling and reaching reservoirs, targets, and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
a lot of times they come from the industry and know exactly how to control these risks,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, very, very familiar. But it's you just got to do a good job of explaining what you're doing and say, talk about what the risks are. Being fully transparent with everything, and these are how you mitigate them. With well-established methods. And I don't know, you just got to work through it. Yeah.
It's funny, when I was fundraising, 10 years ago, there was a lot of, I guess, a misconception sometimes that if you came from oil and gas, it couldn't be green. And I don't know if you guys found that when talking to climate investors, do they have hangups about the fact that you guys come out of industry?
Not to our face, right? So,
Do you think that's a change in the way people perceive like the energy transition, or
It's a good question. I mean, I would like to think so. That the oil and gas industry is full of extremely dedicated, tons of talent, a powerhouse, right, of innovative minds. And guess what? They can care about the environment too. Yeah. Right. Like, so I think so. I mean, I don't know, Gus. I mean, Gus is always, okay. So we do a lot of Zoom, right? And he, apparently I'm oblivious to what people's faces are doing on the other end of the call. And Gus is always, after the call,
very analytical.
You're watching to see how people respond to a comment.
We'll do a download, right, between us after a call. And he's like, oh, did you see their face when they did that? Because I think that they thought this. I'm like, oh man, no, I did not see that. So thank you, Gus, for being the observant one. But so I don't know, Gus, what do you think? Did you get that sense from, certainly, I mean, we talked to a lot of different investors. I'm trying to think if there are any that really gave us a hard time. I don't think so.
I don't think so. Not a hard time. Sometimes I do feel did they ask us, do you do fracking? That's the first question we get.
Yeah.
And we don't, to be clear, but that topic, it's a bit misunderstood. I think we need to change the word maybe and just call it stimulation or something. But some investors are very adverse to that word and the implication that could represent in their mindset. But that's one topic that usually gets.
It's funny you mentioned. I do have a company I've worked with who does geothermal, does do fracking stimulation for geothermal wells. And there's certain folks who just won't take a serious look at them because that crossover, and it's a technology process. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a specific use case, but it's funny how that
perception
lingers and that perception lingers. I think so I appreciate that. I think this is an interesting dynamic too, where you talk about kind of having two people in the room when you fundraise, especially on Zoom. I think they always talk about with starting teams, you kind of need to split up responsibilities because there's too much to do. You can't be in every meeting together doing everything. But when you're doing fundraising, it is very helpful to have someone always present and then someone else kind of take the notes and look at how people
Observe.
respond, because it is so hard to be in a pitch mode because you're always trying to sell.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need someone to listen, and it's hard to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I can't overstate how valuable that is in terms of debrief later, because it's hard to do both simultaneously.
It is. I mean, it's a learned skill, right?
Yeah.
You practice, right? You just got to keep working at it to adjust on the fly, right?
Yep.
To what somebody is. In my case, I guess hopefully listening at least, and maybe not looking at their face too hard, but like listening to what their what are their questions and how are they asking them. Yeah.
You also need a plan to intervene when
It's like,
yes,
this is
we have
what we actually
signals.
need to
yeah,
sell.
we have our like, oh, okay, good, thank you
but,
for.
it's
right.
interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. We've got
It's a lot of
better.
fun. Yeah.
You have fun pitching.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
fun.
Yeah, I love getting up there and selling. This is why this is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, some go better than others, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for sure, right? Sometimes it just falls flat, and it's clear that nope, they're not
has to
with
be-
it, or they don't get it, or whatever it is, and hey, move on.
Move
okay,
on.
that's just how it goes.
It's just a numbers
Exactly.
game. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about some things that haven't gone well, where you learned something.
So failure is how you move forward, right?
Yep.
So that's. I
Yeah,
mean,
we-
I'm a big growth mindset kind of person.
We have some of those.
Yeah, of course.
As an entrepreneur, you gotta have some of those. Yeah.
So picking one. Let's see, so a sort of a technical challenge. I guess you could call it a failure that then connected to connected to fundraising and other things has to do with some of the early designs of the GeoBattery were. Okay, let me preface this. When you convert electricity to heat and go back again, you lose efficiency, right? And so you're probably familiar with round trip efficiency, which is essentially the total electricity you put into a battery versus how much is lost and how much you get back out, right? Lithium ion batteries are really efficient, 80% efficient, right? And so that was frankly a sticking point, is that our round trip efficiency was too low. I mean, it was a non-starter with a lot of folks. You tell them and they'd be like, all right, well, thanks very much. And so that was, an early, I guess, failure, early learning that we took to heart and just grinded on it internally. And then with the labs, with the 3 labs that we're working with, national labs, to get it to a point where, wow, now the system is in a very competitive place. And so we're really happy with that. And, combined with the long duration aspects, I think we're very, very competitive. But I don't know, Gus, is there another? I mean, that was a big one.
That was a big one.
That was kind of
that was a big learning because we did pitch with the wrong round
with the wrong number.
efficiency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was hard to
But
swallow. But it made us better. It made us better.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So now our solution it's up to 65 round trip efficiency, which is very good. And then
Yeah. And what's something, gosh, you think you've learned that maybe it's different?
Different from this technology case
or
in general?
from this case, yeah.
You have to reveal all your failures.
I'm putting Gus on the spot.
This is like,
Yeah, for me, it was a bit difficult because I'm not the technical guy.
Yeah.
And we were going with the first pitch where I was going all in. And then realizing, oops, we're not getting the response we were expecting. So that was and how do we solve this? It's not an easy fix. So we had a lot of conversations. It was not easy, especially among co-founders. But we found a way. A way, and then that's, I think, we're kind of blessed in a way, right?
Sure. I mean, and that was a technical kind of challenge, but that connected and had ramifications then. So we had to work on the commercial side. Gus is extremely creative with how we're working a lot of these revenue models and things like that to make sure that you can't use one metric to define everything, right? And unfortunately that happens. It happens in business, with like discounted cash flow rate or something. Everyone's like, well, what's the number? And you kind of anchor on that and kind of forget about the whole package. And so I think making sure that number then sort of jived with all the other stuff that we were working was pretty.
Because the whole point of arbitrage in some ways is buy low, sell high. And if you're selling at a high enough multiple, doesn't matter what your efficiency is in
Yeah.
some ways.
That-
but they
that
didn't
was
want to
in-
hear it. They
Yeah.
didn't want,
but you
folks
just don't
didn't
wanna
want to hear it.
especially when you have other technologies that are doing higher. So
Yeah.
we were okay. You're doing this, but we're not even listening to you.
It was like I was reminded of you had like the megahertz wars in computers way back in the day. And they're like, well, my Pentium 4 has whatever megahertz, and like, but now nobody cares about that. Like nobody knows what your
That's exactly how
megahertz
it
of your
felt.
gigahertz of your processors are. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of funny, but
Yeah. So Houston, you obviously you guys came from industry, and you decided to stay in Houston. Tell us a little bit why. Did you even look at other locations when thinking about building the business?
not seriously.
Not really.
No, I mean, I guess again, part of it was we were, doing everything remote, so that we were very effective. We didn't have to, go places, and we were here already, I guess. But gosh, Houston has a ton to offer. In not just on the business side, but like for our families, right? So like we really love Houston. We love Texas. We spent a lot of time here, and I don't know. I mean, we put down roots, and we didn't want to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you?
Yeah, I'm even a rodeo fan. So
Oh yes, I saw in your profile you're a rancher.
yeah.
Please tell me more about that. And where is the ranch? I want to know everything.
So I'm originally from Venezuela,
Okay.
and then I got the cattle bug from the family. So it's actually a very funny story because it started while I was doing the MS-150. When
That's the bike race.
the bike race. I was just practicing in Berkshire and all that stuff, and I was just passing all these ranches and all these cows, and the bugs started, and I started for sale sign. So I decided to early invest in a ranch in my career, and it paid out very well. So yeah, I have a small herd. It's
How many head?
50.
Nice.
And
Okay.
it's small, but
Small,
big enough.
but
to
big
be,
enough,
to
yeah.
Big enough to cause some trouble.
Yeah.
Especially when you get the call, hey, your cattle broke the fence. They're in the road. It's like, what? No. But it's something I like. It's more of a hobby for me, but I do really enjoy it, and it's my go away, my place to relax, and and it brings me back to when I was a kid and my family. So.
One of my first introductions to the Houston highway system was being out on 290, and just there was like a cow that got away on the highway, and they had to catch it.
That's scary. Yeah.
And
That's scary.
it's just like, nope, the city is in the country, or the other way around.
Yeah,
but it's
you can have cowboys on your spill
Exactly.
dial for that.
Yeah.
But some of my neighbors had that problem, and we all help each other. And there's a neighbor that's a bad. There's a neighbor that's I'm the guy, the power market guy, but but I don't help them much. But all of there's like another one they're just cowboys, and they just do that, and we all help each other. So.
But it's worked out well, right, from a commute standpoint. So one of our project partners, we're looking to actually do a commercial demo of this early next year, is up in Navasota near Anderson, near his ranch. They're basically same area, and so traveling up there is very
going
helpful.
to College Station.
Yep. Fascinating. And so when you think about the Houston innovation ecosystem, a lot's changed over the time you guys got started. What are you most proud of here in the ecosystem?
What am I most proud of? I mean, I think that Texas and Houston in general, I think that the innovators, there's like not a lot of ego, not a lot of elitism that maybe you get in other places. That's awesome, right? I think that only makes Houston that much more successful, frankly.
For me, and this is a personal experience, it's very diverse. It's a very diverse city. If you have what it takes, you can do it. So yeah, that's for me the diversity of not only the business environment, but the overall city. It's great, and it's a big plus.
Yeah, I think just kind of tying it together, the energy industry like really pulls some of the best from around the world, right? And so that's kind of what creates the diversity. But when you're kind of in this like pool of your peers, like everyone's is really high quality. Like you can't have too big of an ego. because you realize everyone has come very far, has done a lot, has worked in some of the roughest parts of the world, and it makes it humbling too to be here. That's one of the challenges I have with being in the West Coast. Like I don't like going to that ecosystem because everything is like the best thing since sliced bread, and it's almost like a parade when people bring out their technology, and it's just not for me. So that's why
it's
I
a
don't
different way.
It's a different mindset.
It's a different style.
Yeah.
Are there any hidden gems in the ecosystem that people should know about if they're thinking about Houston?
Other than Greentown?
Yeah, other than Greentown.
The Ion, right?
Yeah.
The ecosystem. I mean, there's just so many opportunities to network with folks. And, there's 80 breweries in the Houston area. So it's
lots of gems right there.
One good, right? So
what's your favorite?
My favorite brewery. So mine's technically not in Houston. It's in Magnolia.
That's what
it's Lone Pine.
Lone Pine is the best.
Yeah,
I love them.
Yellow Rose.
Yeah,
it's my
Yellow
favorite.
Rose is the best.
They make some other good smash IPAs too, by the way, that you can only get there, which happens to be on the commute up to the the test site. So and his ranch. So we stopped there a lot. But
nice.
Under the Radar Brewery is pretty cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah.
That's the small.
They're right in town.
They're
right in Midtown, right?
Yeah. But gems, I mean, I think folks probably, I don't know if they take it for granted or not, but places like the museum districts. So we homeschool and like we're always down there. The kids are always down at the zoo or the science museum, going to Miller Outdoor Theater, which is just, free concerts that you can go see, shows from all cultures. I mean, it's an amazing, it's just an amazing opportunity.
Tell me about the theater. Where is it?
Sorry, Miller Outdoor Theater.
Okay.
It's literally right there with the zoo. So I don't know if you've ever taken.
It's an outdoor.
It's just an outdoor
theater.
amphitheater,
Huh.
and they run. It's a concert series. They run basically all summer, kind of like spring, summer. But we went there for Independence Day, and they got the Houston Symphony out there and the fireworks. But my kids went there for I forget what, some kind of Indian cultural, presentation and stuff. I mean, it's really, and it's all free. And you show up there, it's built into a hill, or they made a hill probably. They made a hill.
Houston,
And so, the kids can run around on the grass, and it's right there by the zoo. And the Houston Museum of Natural Science. Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, you gotta check it out. There's a little train that you can ride that takes you around.
I have been on the train.
Yeah, so it goes right around the backside of the theater.
Maybe I just didn't know what it was, or I didn't realize they had programming like that when I was on the train.
Yeah.
What about you, Gus? What are some hidden gems?
No, actually, we talk about it. It's the same one. Yeah. We kid a little bit about the mountains of Houston. But that's where we're missing.
All right, so the Lone Pine and then Gus's Ranch. Those are the two hidden gems of Houston that we need to
pretty much.
share.
Let's not advertise them too well, right?
So what are some gaps here in Houston? What else do we need in the ecosystem to support entrepreneurs like you?
It's a good question. I mean, the traffic. No, seriously, not traffic. Well, that'd be great, but. We talked a little bit about the mindset.
Yeah.
I think there are some downsides a little bit to that mindset, to that traditional energy mindset, right? Is the a little bit of just anchored in oil and gas, frankly, right? And which makes sense. I mean, that's what Houston has been for a long, long time. But I think overcoming some of that, especially maybe on the corporate side, is a challenge for startups. I think it's been a challenge for us. And I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think that's an important one. From a financial perspective, shifting the CapEx investments from oil and gas is going to be a very difficult challenge. It's happening, but we're not there yet.
Yeah.
It needs to fluctuate more too, or the mix needs to be a bit more balanced. And that's going to be a challenge for all.
Yeah. Well, we're only a few years in, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, hey, no, don't get me wrong. Like the trajectory is exploding, right? So we're definitely
on the right path.
We're on the right path.
Yeah.
And we know what we got to achieve, so we're going to get there. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start to wrap up. What's one thing that you would want the audience to know where they could support you guys on your journey?
So at the consumer level, I guess I would say that here in Texas, or at least in ERCOT, you can choose your power provider, right? So one thing I might ask and kind of pose the question to the audience is, when you purchase your 100% renewable electricity plan, how do you get power to your house at night? Or how do you get power when there's no wind?
Yeah.
Clearly, there's still a large proportion of fossil-based energy in the mix, right? And how can we improve that, right? And so obviously what we're trying to do from a storage perspective is to be able to do exactly that, right? Enable wind and solar to be 24/7, to run 24/7. So ask your power provider maybe pose the question to them, hey, how clean are my electrons?
Yeah.
Right? And what are you doing, utility, to do something about that?
Something to another maybe I ask for the audience is to understand what's the difference between net zero and zero, and keep that in mind, because that's something that is not everyone understands, and it's kind of like the organic message, like people, this is organic, but there is a difference between net zero and zero emissions.
And that's the
offsetting
the
credits,
risk and reward of like the RECs and the credit system.
Right.
And so now that the RECs are there and we can get 100% renewable, now we actually get to zero.
Exactly.
Right? That's the kind of next phase. We want to improve our energy consumption.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would say your audience, they're already doing the right thing, right? They're listening to this podcast.
Yep.
So that's
step one.
That's step one, right? Educate yourself and learn. And that's a huge step. So talk to your, talk to your political, talk to your legislature, talk at different levels of government. And I was talking to, I know somebody in the biz and politics and stuff, and they said if they get a phone call to their office, they count that as 100 emails because in this day and age when nobody talks on the phone, if someone actually takes the 2 minutes to call, they really it can make a difference.
Yeah, so. Interesting. And if they want to learn more about what you're doing, they can find you where on the web?
EarthBridgeEnergy.com or LinkedIn. EarthBridge Energy. And we've got a contact form there. Yeah, reach out. Certainly, if anybody has questions, any of the listeners want to know more, or would like to be involved, or if there are any investors that want to talk to us, you're always happy to have that conversation.
Yep. And I'll put your contact info in the show notes, of course.
Great.
I should have asked this at the top.
Yeah.
Tell me about the name, EarthBridge. There's something behind that, I can tell.
Yeah, we kind of spent a long time on this. It comes down to bridging the gap between renewables and fossil fuels. It's that transition, and it's using the earth to do it. I think is really where the core of it lies.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that.